A poor cleaning lady's simple words, "This is wrong," unwittingly saved a billionaire $500 million, proving that even the smallest voice can change the world. Maria woke up before sunrise, as she did every day in her tiny, worn-down apartment on the edge of the city. The walls were thin, the paint chipped, and the floorboards creaked under every step. But it was home, and she had learned to make the most of it. She shared the small space with her teenage son, Arjun, who was still asleep in the corner, his school uniform neatly folded beside him. Maria quietly made breakfast, careful not to wake him. Their life was far from easy. Money was always tight, bills piled up faster than she could pay them, and luxuries were things she only read about in magazines or glimpsed while walking past the glittering stores. Downtown, despite all this, Maria carried herself with dignity and pride. She never complained, even when exhaustion weighed on her like a heavy blanket. She never cut corners at work, no matter how tired she was. She had learned early in life that honesty and hard work were the only things that could carry her through difficult times. Cleaning was not glamorous, and it often went unnoticed. She scrubbed floors until her hands were raw, polished glass until it shone like a mirror, and dusted furniture meticulously, all while listening to the soft hum of her favorite radio programs, her mind wandering to her dreams for a better life for her son. Every day, Maria traveled across the city on crowded buses and trains. She watched people in suits rush past her, carrying briefcases, looking stressed, yet seemingly in control of their lives. She imagined what it would be like to have that kind of stability, to never worry about rent, groceries, or unexpected bills. But she never envied anyone. Instead, she told herself that small, honest steps would eventually lead her to a safer, more secure life. Her goal was simple: give her son an education, keep a roof over their heads, and live without constant fear of what the next month's expenses might bring. On this particular morning, Maria had been hired to clean the penthouse of James Harrington, a billionaire she had only heard about in passing. Stories of his wealth were everywhere: how he had built a business empire from scratch, how his fortune was said to be worth over $500 million, and how he was notoriously private, rarely seen in public. Maria didn't care much about the stories. To her, he was just another client, another house that needed cleaning. Yet, a small thrill ran through her as she prepared for the day. Cleaning a place like that was rare and paid well, enough to cover a few weeks of rent and food with some leftover for small treats for Arjun. When she arrived at the penthouse, she was struck by the sheer size and luxury of the place. Marble floors stretched across vast rooms, chandeliers hung from high ceilings, and the furniture gleamed as if polished by invisible hands. It was unlike any home Maria had ever entered. She took a deep breath, reminding herself to stay focused. She had a routine, and she followed it meticulously, dusting surfaces, vacuuming carpets, and ensuring that everything looked perfect. Even in such a grand setting, Maria treated her work with the same care she gave to every home she cleaned. Nothing escaped her attention, not a smudge on a window, not a fingerprint on a glass table, not a speck of dust on the edge of a bookshelf. As she moved through the rooms, Maria couldn't help but notice the contrast between the wealth around her and the modest life she led. The opulence was overwhelming, yet she felt no bitterness. She understood that this was not her world, but that did not mean she could not be proud of her own life. She had dignity, honesty, and resilience, qualities money could never buy. She reminded herself of the lessons her mother had taught her, that no matter how little one had, integrity and hard work were worth more than any fortune. Cleaning James Harrington's office, however, was different from cleaning any other room. Papers were scattered across the desk, some neatly stacked, others slightly askew, and Maria instinctively began arranging them, straightening corners, and making the space look orderly. Her eyes, trained by years of detail-oriented work, caught small irregularities: a stack of papers slightly misaligned, a coffee stain barely noticeable on an expensive mahogany desk, a pen left uncapped. She took care of each, not because anyone would notice, but because she believed in doing the right thing. While her hands worked, Maria's mind wandered to her son. Arjun was bright and curious, always asking questions about the world and how it worked. She wanted him to have opportunities she never had. She imagined him growing up with stability, pursuing his dreams without the constant worry of money. The thought gave her energy, even as her body ached from bending, scrubbing, and carrying cleaning supplies up and down the grand staircases. Maria's routine continued, methodical and precise. She dusted every surface, cleaned the windows until they gleamed, and polished the floors until her reflection shimmered in them. But in the back of her mind, a quiet observation nagged at her. Something in the pile of papers on James's desk looked unusual. She didn't know much about finance or business, but instinctively, something felt off. She made a mental note to look closer once she finished the initial cleaning. By mid-morning, the penthouse was spotless, every corner gleaming. Maria stepped back and admired her work quietly, feeling a small sense of pride. This was not just about cleaning. It was about respect for the space, for the work itself, and for herself. As she prepared to leave the office, she glanced once more at the desk, her curiosity getting the better of her. Little did she know, that small act of observation would soon lead her into a situation far beyond anything she had ever imagined. A situation where her honesty, her attention to detail, and her simple moral instincts would intersect with the world of unimaginable wealth and high-stakes decisions. In that moment, Maria was just a cleaning lady, moving through a world she barely understood. Unaware that her day would turn from ordinary to extraordinary, her life was simple, her concerns modest, but her actions, guided by integrity and careful observation, would soon have consequences that reached far beyond the small apartment she called home, far beyond the crowded city streets she navigated daily, and even beyond the luxury of the penthouse she had cleaned so meticulously. Her day, which began like any other, was about to take a turn that would test her courage, her judgment, and her sense of right and wrong in ways Maria could never have anticipated. Maria had just finished tidying up James Harrington's office, her hands slightly sore from the morning's work. She had arranged the papers neatly, dusted the shelves, and polished the desk until it gleamed. Yet as she stood there, her eyes kept returning to a particular pile of documents on the far corner of the desk. Something about it made her pause. Most of the papers were financial forms, transfer orders, statements, and spreadsheets with numbers she didn't fully understand. She wasn't trained in finance, but she had enough common sense to recognize when something looked unusual. Her eyes scanned the sheets automatically, as if the years of meticulous cleaning had sharpened her attention to detail beyond ordinary notice. As she flipped through the top sheet, her brow furrowed. One number caught her eye, a string of digits in a transfer form. Something about it didn't sit right with her. She read it again, line by line, counting the zeros and comparing the numbers. Her heart began to race slowly, not from excitement, but from a sense of unease. She didn't know exactly what she was looking at, but she knew instinctively that the sum of money on the sheet was far too large. It wasn't just a minor error. It was huge, incomprehensibly huge. In her mind, she whispered, "This is wrong." The words felt weighty, as if they carried the power of consequences she couldn't yet imagine. Maria felt a sudden wave of fear. She was just a cleaning lady, and the implications of interfering in a billionaire's finances were enormous. She could get in trouble. She could lose her job. She could even be accused of something she didn't do, but something deeper inside. A sense of morality and duty she had cultivated through a life of struggle, wouldn't let her ignore it. She was no stranger to hard work and honesty, and she knew in her heart that ignoring a clear mistake, even if she didn't understand it fully, was not an option. She thought about walking away, pretending she hadn't seen anything, and finishing her work like she normally would. It would have been easier. But she couldn't shake the feeling that the money on the page millions, as far as she could tell, was about to be lost because of a simple error. She thought about the people who might be affected if this transfer went through, about the shock and chaos it could create. Maria didn't even know the full extent of the error, but her instincts told her that action was necessary. Maria decided to take a risk. She carefully tucked the papers together so they wouldn't get misplaced and carried them with her. As she moved toward the building manager's office, she explained to him, in her simple words, that she thought there was a mistake in the documents she had seen. The manager looked at her with a mix of surprise and disbelief. After all, she was just a cleaning lady. What did she know about financial documents, transfers, or accounting? He smiled politely and told her it was probably nothing to worry about. Maria, however, was not convinced. She could feel the weight of the error in her gut, and she knew she had to do more. She returned to James's office for a moment, pretending to continue her cleaning, and glanced once more at the documents. Every instinct in her body told her that the numbers were off. She took a deep breath and decided to reach further, to someone who might actually check the numbers properly. She noticed a small post-it note attached to one of the files with a phone number scribbled on it. It appeared to be for one of James's assistants. Maria hesitated, wondering if she should call. She had never made a call like this before, never reported something she didn't fully understand to someone higher up. But the thought of walking away and doing nothing was unbearable. With trembling hands, she dialed the number. Her voice was nervous but clear. She explained what she had seen as simply and honestly as possible. "I'm sorry, I don't know if this is correct, but I think there's a mistake in these papers. Please check it." She felt her words were too clumsy, too simple for something so important. The assistant on the other end paused, and Maria could hear the faint sound of skepticism in his voice. He asked a few questions, trying to understand what she was saying, and Maria repeated her explanation patiently. She could feel her heart pounding. Was he taking her seriously, or would she be dismissed as someone who had no idea what she was talking about? The assistant finally agreed to take the documents and promised to review them. Maria felt a small wave of relief, though a knot of anxiety remained in her chest. She returned to her work, cleaning the remaining corners of the penthouse, but she couldn't concentrate fully. Her mind kept circling back to the papers, to the numbers, to the potential disaster she had just intercepted. She tried to rationalize. Her role, she was just a cleaning lady. After all, but the truth was undeniable. She had noticed something important. She had acted on it, and now she had to wait. Hours passed slowly. Maria completed the rest of the cleaning, polished the floors again, and carefully replaced every item in the office exactly as it had been. She left the penthouse, her mind still buzzing with worry and curiosity. On her way home, she tried to distract herself by thinking about her son's homework, the grocery list, and her small plans for the evening, but it was no use. The thought of what could have gone wrong if she had ignored the papers lingered in her mind like a shadow. At home, Maria sat at the small kitchen table, quietly preparing dinner while Arjun did his homework. She explained nothing of the day to him. It was a secret she had to carry alone. She replayed every moment, every decision, every glance at the documents, wondering if she had done the right thing. Her son looked up occasionally and asked questions about school or his friends, and she smiled, hiding her anxiety. She knew that she might never be recognized for what she had done, that no one might ever know she had intervened. But that didn't matter. The choice to act honestly, to speak up even when it was risky, was its own reward. That night, as she lay in bed, Maria thought about the strange twists of life that had brought her to this moment. A cleaning lady in a billionaire's penthouse, noticing something unusual, acting out of instinct, and hoping it mattered. She thought about the thousands of small decisions people made, everyday choices between honesty and convenience, integrity and comfort, and realized that sometimes even the smallest person, in the quietest way, could make a difference. She didn't yet know the full impact of her actions, but she knew in her heart that she had done the right thing. Maria fell asleep with a mixture of exhaustion and anticipation. She didn't know it yet, but her simple act of honesty, her careful attention to detail, and her courage to speak up were about to prevent a mistake of unimaginable scale, one that could have cost James Harrington hundreds of millions of dollars. Her life, which had always felt ordinary and constrained by circumstance, was about to intersect with extraordinary events in ways she could never have imagined. Maria's day had started like any other, but now she found herself at the center of a situation far beyond anything she had faced before. She had noticed the error in the documents, acted on instinct, and reached out to the assistant whose number she had found. Yet as hours passed without any word, she began to feel a gnawing worry. Did she do the right thing? Would anyone take her seriously? She was only a cleaning lady, and she knew that in the world of billionaires, her voice was likely to be overlooked. The moral dilemma weighed heavily on her. On one hand, she had the option to let it go, to return to her routine of cleaning and going home, pretending she had never seen the papers. That path was safe and comfortable. No one would question her, no one would call her naive, and she could go about her day without anxiety. But deep down, Maria could not ignore the voice in her head that kept repeating the words. This is wrong. She thought about the sheer magnitude of the error. She had stumbled upon millions of dollars at risk and realized that doing nothing would be a betrayal of her own sense of morality as she prepared for her next cleaning job in a different building. Her mind refused to focus. She replayed the events of the day, questioning herself. Had she been mistaken? What if the assistant didn't check the papers properly, or worse, dismissed her warning? The thought of remaining silent and allowing a huge mistake to happen gnawed at her. Maria felt trapped between fear and responsibility. Fear of stepping out of her place, responsibility that felt like it rested on her shoulders alone. Finally, Maria made a decision. She would follow up. She returned to the office, pretending to double-check that everything was neat and tidy, and quietly asked the assistant if he had reviewed the documents yet. The assistant gave her a polite but dismissive smile. He said he was busy, that everything seemed fine to him, and that she didn't need to worry. Maria's heart sank, but she did not give up. She tried to explain again, using the simplest words possible, pointing out that the numbers might be wrong and that someone should take a closer look. She spoke carefully, avoiding words that would make her sound accusatory or overstepping her role. The assistant frowned, clearly unsure of what to do. Maria sensed the skepticism in his expression. She had expected it, but it still stung. Being doubted because of her job, her background, or a lack of formal education was something Maria was used to, yet it frustrated her. She knew the error was real, and she could see it clearly. Her insistence was not about proving herself fit, was about preventing a disaster. She stayed calm, spoke honestly, and relied on the clarity of her observation rather than force or authority. Hours dragged on. Maria returned home that evening, exhausted physically and emotionally. Her son Arjun greeted her with his usual cheerful smile, but Maria's mind was elsewhere. She prepared dinner, washed the dishes, and sat quietly, thinking about the situation. The moral dilemma still weighed heavily on her. Should she push further? She had already spoken to the assistant, and he had dismissed her. Should she risk overstepping boundaries, risk her job, or even risk angering someone much more powerful than herself, just to make sure the mistake was corrected? Maria's thoughts drifted to her own life and the principles she had always followed. She remembered her mother's words, repeated countless times in her childhood. Do the right thing, even if no one notices. Your conscience will always know the truth. Maria realized that the fear of consequences was temporary, but the regret of ignoring a clear wrong could last forever. She felt a strong resolve forming in her heart. She could not ignore what she had seen, no matter how uncomfortable it was to continue pushing. The next day, Maria returned to James Harrington's penthouse. She carried herself with her usual quiet confidence, cleaning supplies in hand, but her mind was focused on the documents. She found the assistant again, trying a different approach. Instead of simply pointing out the error, she framed it as a question, asking if he could please double-check the figures because she thought something looked unusual. Her tone was respectful and careful, and her sincerity was impossible to deny. To her surprise, the assistant finally paused, taking her seriously enough to glance at the papers again. He studied them carefully, and Maria watched silently, her heart beating fast. She stayed back, pretending to dust shelves and tidy corners, not wanting to interfere, but unable to stop herself from peeking occasionally. The assistant's expression changed from skepticism to confusion, then to alarm. Maria's instincts told her he had noticed the mistake. She felt a quiet thrill of relief, but also a renewed anxiety. What would happen next? Would he report it to James? Would it be corrected in time? Maria continued her work, keeping everything neat and orderly. She avoided drawing attention to herself while maintaining a careful watch over the situation. The tension in the air was palpable, even though she did not know the details of the error herself. All she knew was that her observation, her honesty, and her persistence were crucial to preventing a massive mistake. It was a strange position to be in, a cleaning lady holding a small but vital piece of a puzzle that could affect millions of dollars. By late afternoon, the assistant finally took the document seriously and promised to escalate the matter to someone higher up. Maria felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. Relief that action would finally be taken, anxiety about how the situation would unfold. She returned home, exhausted but proud. That night, she lay in bed thinking about the day, reflecting on her choices. She realized that courage wasn't always about grand gestures or heroic acts. It was often about quiet persistence, honesty, and the willingness to speak up even when you were afraid. Maria thought about the moral dilemma she had faced. She had chosen responsibility over fear, conscience over comfort. She had risked her reputation, her job, and even her sense of security to do what she knew was right. And now, that choice had set events in motion that could prevent a catastrophe. She understood that integrity often required stepping outside one's comfort zone, standing up for what was right, and trusting that truth had value, even when no one else recognized it. That night, Maria could finally rest, though her mind remained alert with anticipation. She knew she had done everything within her power. The next steps were out of her hands, and yet she felt a quiet confidence. She had acted correctly, guided by a simple but powerful principle. When something is wrong, it must be corrected. No matter who you are or how small your role seems, in the quiet of her small apartment, with her son sleeping peacefully nearby, Maria reflected on how strange and unexpected life could be. A simple observation, a moment of attention to detail, decision to act honestly could place someone like her at the center of events she could never have imagined. She felt a mix of humility and quiet pride. She had faced fear, confronted doubt, and acted with integrity. And though she did not yet know the full outcome, she sensed that her choice would matter in ways far beyond her understanding. Maria's life had always been ordinary, defined by struggle and modesty, but that ordinary life had given her something extraordinary, a sense of right and wrong, a moral compass that guided her even in the most unexpected circumstances. She realized that even the smallest, simplest actions could ripple out to create monumental effects, and that her quiet courage and moral clarity had already set the stage for a change she could not yet see. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of James Harrington's penthouse, hitting the polished marble floors and the gleaming surfaces of his expansive office. James sat at his massive mahogany desk, staring at the stack of financial documents before him. He was a man used to power, control, and precision. Mistakes were rare in his world, and yet today there was a report on his desk that unsettled him. His assistant, usually composed and efficient, had called him in with urgency, insisting that a cleaning lady, Maria, had pointed out an error in one of the transfer documents. At first, James had been incredulous. A cleaning lady. The idea that someone whose job was to polish floors and dust shelves could notice a financial discrepancy seemed almost absurd. Yet the assistant was serious, and the sense of alarm in his voice was unmistakable. James frowned and picked up the papers himself, scanning the numbers carefully. At first glance they seemed orderly, routine, nothing unusual. But as he looked closer, he noticed a figure that made his heart skip a beat: a transfer of an amount that was entirely incorrect. An error of a zero that would have sent hundreds of millions of dollars to the wrong account. He leaned back in his chair, gripping the arms tightly, trying to process what he was seeing. The enormity of the mistake hit him slowly, like a wave. $500 million could have vanished, lost forever, because of a simple oversight. James's mind raced, thinking about the potential fallout, the chaos it would cause in his company, and the questions he would face from investors, board members, and the media. He could hardly believe that the error had almost gone unnoticed. His trained eyes went back to the papers again and again, verifying each figure meticulously. Each time, the same mistake appeared, and with each verification, the panic in him grew. James's gaze then shifted to the note from Maria, simple and brief, explaining what she had seen. There was no sophistication in her words, No technical jargon, just a straightforward warning that something was wrong. And yet, that simplicity carried power. It had alerted someone in the chain of command, prompted a check, and prevented a disaster. James sat silently, stunned by the realization that someone so far removed from the world of finance had saved him from a catastrophic mistake. He called his assistant over, and together they reviewed the documents again, line by line. Each correction Maria had pointed out was confirmed, and the error was contained. The weight of relief was almost physical, as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders. James could hardly believe it. His eyes, trained to detect even the smallest discrepancies, had missed something that an ordinary person had noticed. The thought humbled him. How often had he overlooked the importance of simple observation, of honesty, of courage in the smallest acts? After confirming that the error was corrected, James leaned back and reflected on Maria. She was just a cleaning lady, someone he had likely passed in the hallway countless times without a second thought. She had no formal financial training, no power in his company. Yet her honesty and attention to detail had changed the course of events in a profound way. He felt a growing sense of admiration for her, mixed with a deep curiosity. Who was she? What kind of person would speak up so boldly, so fearlessly, in a world that usually ignored people like her? James decided to learn more. He asked his assistant to find out where she lived, her background, and her life circumstances. What he discovered made him respect her even more. Maria lived in a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, working long hours cleaning offices and luxury homes to provide for her teenage son. She had never asked for recognition, never sought attention, and yet, without hesitation, she had acted correctly because it was the right thing to do. The simplicity and integrity of her decision left James quietly impressed in his office. James began to think about how easily a fortune could have been lost. He thought about the countless transactions, the immense sums of money, and the systems he had built to maintain control. And yet, despite all his experience, training, and precautions, a single human observation, an honest, simple observation, had prevented a disaster. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that no system, no matter how sophisticated, could replace the value of human integrity and moral courage. Maria had done what machines, algorithms, and trained experts could not. She had acted from a place of conscience and clarity. The story of Maria's actions spread quickly within his inner circle. Colleagues, board members, and even senior financial officers learned about the cleaning lady who had identified the error. Some were incredulous, others deeply impressed. James, however, felt a personal responsibility to recognize her contribution properly. It was not enough to simply correct the mistake. Maria's honesty, courage, and persistence had to be acknowledged. He resolved that he would meet her in person, to thank her, and to ensure that she understood the importance of what she had done. Meanwhile, Maria went about her day unaware of the scale of the impact she had made. She continued cleaning, returning to her routine, focused on the tasks at hand and worried about the next day's rent and her son's schoolwork. She had no idea that the $500 million had been saved, or that her name had sparked admiration and curiosity in one of the richest men in the world. Her actions, simple and instinctive, had already changed the course of events in a way she could not yet see. James, sitting in his office, reflected on the irony of the situation. He had spent his life surrounded by wealth, power, and sophistication. Yet it was someone from outside his world who had prevented a monumental financial disaster. The lesson was clear: vigilance, attention, and honesty could come from the most unexpected places, and the value of moral courage could never be underestimated. He realized that his own assumptions about people, status, and ability had been challenged profoundly by Maria's actions. By the end of the day, James had made a decision. Maria would be personally recognized, not with fanfare or public announcements, but in a way that respected her humility while honoring her integrity. He wanted her to know that her actions mattered, that her courage had saved not just money, but also the stability of his company and the trust of countless people who depended on him. In private, he felt a deep gratitude, the kind that changes the way one sees the world and the people in it. as the sun set over the city. James Harrington reflected on the unpredictable power of simple honesty. A cleaning lady, unnoticed and often overlooked, it reminded him of the most important truth in life: doing the right thing, even when no one is watching, can have consequences far beyond one's imagination. The error had been caught, the money saved. And yet the real value lay not in the dollars, but in the lesson he had learned about integrity, humility, and the unexpected heroism of ordinary people. That night, James could not stop thinking about Maria. He imagined her life, her struggles, and her dedication to her son. He wondered what motivated her, how she had found the courage to speak up, and how rare it was to encounter such moral clarity. The more he thought, the more he realized that her simple words, "This is wrong," had changed everything. It was a reminder that sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest power, and that honesty and courage can come from the most unexpected corners of the world. James knew that he would meet her soon. He wanted to express his gratitude, to ensure that she understood how significant her actions had been. But he also wanted to learn from her, to see the world through the eyes of someone who, despite poverty and struggle, could recognize truth and act on it with courage. Maria's bravery had prevented disaster, and in doing so, had left an indelible mark, not just on his finances, but on his understanding of people, integrity, and the extraordinary power of simple human honesty. James Harrington made the decision to meet Maria in person, and for him, it was not a casual gesture. He wanted her to understand fully the impact of what she had done. For someone like him, used to business meetings and boardroom negotiations, the idea of personally seeking out a cleaning lady to express gratitude was unusual, but he felt it was necessary. Maria had done something remarkable. She had noticed a mistake that could have cost him $500 million, acted on her conscience, and prevented a disaster. Her courage and honesty deserved recognition, not just for the financial impact, but for the moral clarity she had shown. The following morning, Maria went about her routine as usual. She cleaned buildings, polished floors, and dusted surfaces, unaware that her life was about to change. She had no idea that her simple act of honesty had reached the highest office in the Harrington Empire. She did not expect recognition or reward. For her, doing the right thing had always been its own reward. Her motivation was simple: integrity and responsibility. Yet, as she entered the penthouse once again to complete her duties, she was greeted not by the usual assistant or manager, but by James Harrington himself. Maria froze for a moment. The billionaire she had only heard about in stories was standing in front of her, a serious expression on his face. She felt a mix of awe and nervousness. Her hands, which were usually steady while cleaning, trembled slightly as she tried to maintain her composure. James smiled gently, a gesture that immediately put her at ease. "Maria," he said, his voice calm but sincere, "I wanted to meet you personally, to thank you." Maria blinked, unsure how to respond. She had never imagined that her simple observation could lead to such an encounter. James invited her to sit down, and they spoke quietly, away from the polished floors and the expensive furniture. He explained in simple terms the gravity of the mistake she had prevented. $500 million, he said, could have been transferred to the wrong account, a disaster that would have affected countless people. Maria listened quietly, her heart pounding. She realized the magnitude of her actions in a way she never had before. What had started as a simple observation had turned into something monumental. As James spoke, Maria felt a mix of humility and pride. She had always believed in doing the right thing. She had never imagined that her actions could have such far-reaching consequences. James acknowledged this explicitly, emphasizing that her honesty and courage had prevented a disaster that even highly trained professionals might have missed. Maria's eyes widened as she listened. She had never considered herself a hero. She had just done what she thought was right. Yet here was a billionaire telling her that her actions mattered more than she could have imagined. James then reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small envelope. He handed it to Maria. Inside was a financial reward, enough to provide security for her and her son for years to come. He explained that this was not just a gift, but recognition of her courage and integrity. Maria was overwhelmed. She had never imagined such generosity, nor had she sought it. Her mind raced with thoughts of how this money could change her life, paying off rent, ensuring Arjun's education, and providing stability they had never known. Yet she felt a deeper gratitude for the recognition itself. For being seen and appreciated for doing the right thing, James also offered her a scholarship opportunity for Arjun, ensuring that her son could pursue his education without financial worry. Maria's heart swelled with emotion. All her struggles, all the sacrifices she had made suddenly seemed worthwhile. Her years of hard work, living modestly and maintaining her integrity, had led to this moment. It was a validation of her values, a confirmation that honesty, courage, and moral clarity could indeed make a difference in the world. The encounter between Maria and James left a lasting impression on both of them. For James, it was a lesson in humility and respect for ordinary people whose actions often go unnoticed. He realized that wealth and power were meaningless without the integrity of those around him. Maria, on the other hand, felt a renewed sense of purpose. Her belief in doing the right thing had been vindicated in the most extraordinary way, reinforcing her conviction that even small actions could create significant change. Word of Maria's act spread quickly, first within the company and then in the local news. She became a symbol of honesty and courage, admired by people from all walks of life. Articles highlighted her simplicity, her moral clarity, and the extraordinary impact of her actions. She remained humble throughout, insisting that she had only done what any person in her place would have done. Yet the story resonated with many, reminding people that ordinary individuals could perform extraordinary deeds. Life for Maria changed gradually, but meaningfully. With the financial reward, she was able to secure a comfortable home for herself and Arjun, relieving years of worry and stress. She ensured her son's education was funded, allowing him to pursue opportunities she could only dream of. Yet, despite the newfound comfort, she remained grounded, continuing to work hard and live modestly. The recognition and reward were important, but they did not change the values she had always held dear: honesty, diligence, and care for others. For James, Maria's actions became a guiding story within his company. He implemented systems to ensure that employees at all levels were encouraged to speak up when they noticed discrepancies or errors, emphasizing that integrity and courage were valued above position or rank. Maria's story became a case study in leadership, ethics, and the unexpected power of ordinary people. It reminded everyone, including James himself, that paying attention to small details in acting, that honesty, could prevent major disasters and inspire lasting change. As months passed, Maria and James maintained a quiet but respectful connection. James occasionally checked in to see how Maria and her son were doing, not out of obligation, but out of genuine respect and gratitude. Maria, in turn, never let the recognition change her character. She remained humble, hardworking, and deeply committed to her family. The experience had taught her that honesty, courage, and persistence were not just abstract values. They had the power to change lives, even the lives of billionaires, in profound ways. Looking back, Maria realized that the day she noticed the error was a turning point. It was a moment when her ordinary life intersected with extraordinary circumstances. Her decision to speak up, to act honestly despite fear and uncertainty, had created a ripple effect that went far beyond her expectations. The moral courage she had exercised had saved not just money, but also reinforced the importance of integrity, attention to detail, and the power of ordinary individuals in shaping extraordinary outcomes. Maria's story became more than just an incident of financial intervention. It became an inspiration. People admired her not for wealth, fame, or status, but for her character. She embodied the idea that doing the right thing, even quietly and without expectation of reward, could have consequences far greater than one could imagine. Her simple words, "This is wrong," spoken with honesty and courage, had prevented a disaster, brought recognition, and altered the course of her life and her son's life forever. In the end, Maria's life was transformed. not only by financial security and opportunity, but by the affirmation of her values. She had proven that integrity matters, that courage is not reserved for the powerful or the famous, and that even the smallest acts of honesty can ripple outward to create enormous impact. Her story, and the quiet heroism it revealed, remained a testament to the extraordinary power of ordinary people, a reminder that sometimes the most significant changes in the world come from those we least expect.